Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we're discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time. I'm your host, Tim Brayton. I have with me a couple guests today, including a not newcomer to the podcast, but a returning, very welcome voice, someone we haven't had in our current incarnation of the show, but longtime listeners may remember her very much from a couple years back. So join me, everyone, in giving a very warm welcome to returning podcast guest, Rhiannoch Robinson.
Hello, Tim. It's so great to be back.
Thank you. It's great to have you back. And it occurs to me, now that I've gone through all that, I'm not sure that you and I have ever been on a podcast together.
I don't think so.
Interacted as humans and not as text and an email. I feel like I've interacted with you, but I don't know that that's true now.
I think we met briefly in Madison.
That's right.
That's it.
You came up to, was it the Batman?
Yes, it was the Batman, but there's no evidence. There's no recorded evidence, so who knows if it's true.
I
swear I saw a picture of you guys there.
Oh, you know what?
I don't know if Tim was in it, though.
I feel like Carrie probably did what she could to make sure a group shot got taken of that party.
Yes, I recall a photo.
And of course, as you just heard, our other guest for the night, no stranger to the podcast at all, hot on the heels of what I thought was one of the most episodes we've ever had.
Most episodes, yes.
I was a big fan. Mandy Albert, co-host or host of Your Movie Rocks, which most recently talked about what Agora does and does not get right about the early church and its tensions with Judaism. Go listen to it. It is so good.
Tim, you're going to put them off the podcast forever.
I had such a good time listening to that episode.
I'm so glad that a minimum of one of you did. That was what we were aiming for all along. We just lived to make Tim happy.
I am not going to say that any other person who listens to Alternate Ending will like it as much as I did. I might comfortably say that would not be the case, in fact, but I had a really good time listening to it. And
all great art comes from trying to make something for an audience of one, so
exactly.
You crushed it, Mandy.
No, you have to have, if you have passion for something, you'll make us love it. This is my strong belief about the best way to approach everything. But so we do have I think a pretty fun topic for you all tonight. I don't remember who proposed it specifically, but I know it was one of the two of you.
I think it was Mandy.
Was it?
It was Mandy.
I think it was me.
All right.
Because the way that this came about was that way back in the before times, I had seen this as a proposed topic for a top 5. And I was so excited about the prospect of this top 5. And then this top 5 never happened. And I have been devastated that this top 5 never happened. And now it won't be a top 5, but it will at least be an episode.
I was going to say, I love that we didn't do it as a top 5 because we stopped doing top 5s because they were too cumbersome, and I have a list of like 8. So it's great. A non-ranked list, though. They're easier to put together. But since this was your idea, I'd be happy to let you introduce it.
Yeah, so the topic is good scenes in bad movies.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about
I know we've talked before about like good performances in bad movies and bad performances in good movies, but let's take the focus away from just performances for a little bit, because performances are not the only thing that make or break a movie.
I agree. And it's, the site's tagline, discovering good movies one bad movie at a time, is a bit of a coelacanth at this moment. Like it is a relic from another incarnation of the site and may not last till the end of the year, who can say. But I do feel like this topic is a really good fit for that mission, because it is about, and really it's a good fit for the mission of Your Movie Rocks too. It's about being saddled with a movie that isn't good and isn't working, but you're going to extract the pleasure from it. You're going to say, no, this is the part of this movie that I am glad to have interfaced with this work of art.
Where's the gold nugget in the pig's trough?
Exactly,
we're going to find it.
Exactly.
By God. Yeah.
Before we do that, though, we are going to do our regular movie roundtable, where we're just going to bring a movie to talk about, share our thoughts, maybe suggest it to all of you, maybe not. And I'm also going to kick that to you first, Mandy, because I did some homework for your movie roundtable, and I want to show that homework
just for
off.
Me. All right. Okay, so the movie that I am bringing to the table is The Luckiest Man in America, directed by Samir Oliveros, whom I know from absolutely nothing else. And my understanding is that I shouldn't know him from anything else in particular.
It's his first feature, if I'm not mistaken. And the impression I've gotten from looking at this movie, it's basically a Chilean production wearing the clothes of a Hollywood indie or an American indie.
That explains maybe a great deal.
Because the production, there are several production companies. It's one of those movies where like you sit through a minute of production logos, but one of the primary ones is, I forget the name of it, but it's Pablo Larraín's production company.
Okay.
And Pablo Larraín
wouldn't have been able to
fact,
identify it on site.
An executive producer, or maybe just a producer. I think executive producer.
Okay, interesting. So every so often, when one is an avid film watcher, one comes across a movie to which the only possible reaction is, this movie was made for me. Because no one else could possibly share the weird mixture of predilections that would lead one to obsessively seek out this movie other than me. Luckiest Man in America was very clearly made for me because The Luckiest Man in America occurs at the intersection of 80s game shows and Paul Walter Hauser. Two things with which I have a current passionate love affair. Paul Walter Hauser has been one of my favorite working actors since I was one of the 6 people in the world who actually went to see Richard Jewell. But anyway, I think he's a great actor. I think he's a very underrated actor. I think he does incredibly interesting things, and I cannot take my eyes away from him anytime he is on screen. And then also there is 80s game shows, and in particular, the 80s game show Press Your Luck. Have either of you ever watched Press Your Luck before?
I sure have.
I've only watched the part of this one famed streak.
Yes, very good. So Press Your Luck was one of the big, kind of one of the most 80s game shows in a lot of ways. And it actually didn't last very long. It was only on the air for 3 years on TV.
It did have, to be clear though, a very long afterlife in syndication, because I certainly did not watch it when it was new, but I watched it as a person who has memories of watching it. So it was on the air for a while.
So it is a touchstone for a lot of reasons. It gifted us its famous catchphrase, "Big bucks, no whammies," which is the thing they made all the contestants cheer as they were playing the big board portion of the show. And it has, of course, the Whammy, who was its famous little evil mascot who would take away your money if you ever landed on him, and was also my Halloween costume, 2014 or 2015 or thereabouts. But despite being incredibly famous, I would say that it is underrated as a game show, because I feel like even game show nerds kind of consider it a bit of a throwaway. I do not think there is anything more exciting in game shows than a really good Press Your Luck spin battle. So that's the thing that makes it exciting, is that basically you spend a lot of time watching through your fingers, waiting for somebody to hit a whammy.
Amazing.
And the ultimate looking through your fingers, waiting for somebody to hit a whammy occurred in, I want to say 1984, might have been 1985, when the most famous Press Your Luck contestant arrived on the scene, Mr. Michael Larson. So this was a very odd fellow from a little town in Ohio. They let him on the show, along with 2 innocent people, Ed Long and Janie Littress, who played alongside him. And he proceeded to win and win and win and win and win and win and win. And I believe he spun something like 33 times without ever hitting a whammy.
The 2 fun facts are he won so many times that they had to make it a double-length episode because there was no mechanism for stopping an episode in the middle of it recording. So they just had to end on a cliffhanger. The other fun fact that I knew that he, at the time, had the record for the most money won in a game show, and it has been since surpassed. Adjusted for inflation, he still is the single most winning game show contestant.
Incredible. And how did he manage this amazing feat, Mandy?
So here's the funny thing. He had a really good memory, and he had been obsessively watching Press Your Luck for a long time. And what he determined was that the random board was not, in fact, random. There were 5 pre-programmed light patterns that just played over and over again because the producers were lazy motherfuckers, basically. And they figured, we can do just fine with 5 light patterns. Nobody will ever figure this out. Who would do something like that? That is a very dangerous question to be asking yourself as somebody who controls a big money TV show. But also a thing that he discovered, and this was the key to his little scheme, was that there were 2 spaces on the board in which a whammy never appeared. One of those spaces was the big bucks space, which not only contained the highest dollar value on the board, but automatically awarded you an extra spin. So he basically figured out how to get the board to give him infinite money. So anyway, somebody finally decided to make a movie about this guy. He's been a figure of obsession in the game show world for quite a long time. He's considered like one of those great contestants that everybody's just got to see in action at some point or another. Game Show Network made a documentary about him already, but Samir Oliveros decided also to finally make a movie about him and to cast Paul Walter Hauser as him. So this is set up, obviously. It takes place just over the course of filming the 2 episodes. Large portions of it just take place in the Press Your Luck studio. And then the thing that actually is creating the drama on the outside is that as Michael Larson is cleaning up the game on the inside and also generally weirding everybody out because he's a very strange and off-putting guy and nobody can quite figure out what his deal is the quest of the producers and the middle managers on the show as he is playing to figure out who this guy is and is there a way that they can get him to stop playing before he basically walks away with the network. And then, of course, by the end, you know, if you know the story, you know that he does win in 1984 money $110,000, which also included a couple of nice vacation packages. And the little human interest bit was that he had said one of the things he really wanted to do was buy a birthday present for his daughter, which he hadn't been able to afford. And so my understanding is he did send a couple of nice birthday presents to his 6-year-old before he then proceeded to lose all of his money in bad investment deals.
Oh, no.
Yeah, in reality, and the film presents a dramatic version of the story to a certain extent. It creates characters, it streamlines him, but he does appear to have had some sort of literal compulsion to being a con artist. And both prior to and subsequent to his appearance on Press Your Luck, did get him in a great deal of trouble, and he ended up holding on to very little of that enormous windfall. But
yikes.
And by the time he died, he was on the run from the FBI.
Yes.
I did just adjust that for inflation, and it is $365,000 in 2025 dollars.
In a single game show episode.
But yeah, so the movie does kind of clear out some of the clutter that keeps it from being a very, very straightforward thing. It is a real-time thriller. Like, it takes place over the amount of time that this process occurred. And it basically is a procedural thriller about being the producers and directors of a not a live, but a live-to-tape, shall we say, television production, and what to do when something goes on that you didn't have a contingency plan for.
So the problem that I run into in talking about this movie is that I don't know how to talk about it from the vantage point of somebody who is not a giant Press Your Luck fan.
I was just going to say,
who did not already know the story by heart coming in.
I was going to say, is it good? And then I was like, can Mandy determine whether it's good? Or is Mandy just too Mandy to be able to say something like that?
So I'm going to try. So I enjoyed the movie more than I enjoyed Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, shit, yes.
But yes, but the movie suffered a little bit from what I have come to think of as the Bohemian Rhapsody problem, which is the real story was juicy enough. Why did you feel like you needed to make all this shit up? So my favorite parts of the movie are the ones that take place inside the Press Your Luck set, because this is a really heavily stylized depiction of a game show set. The impression that I got of the Press Your Luck set was that they were basically trying to depict it as a version of hell,
yes.
with the whammy as Satan. The set is very aggressively pink and orange. You can feel how hot and bright the lights are at all times. You can see every pore on the actors' faces when they are on the set, not just on Paul Walter Hauser's, but on the actors playing Ed and Janie as well. Walton Goggins, who plays Peter Tamarkin, who was the host of Press Your Luck, struck me as a very strange choice for this role. Not because he's a bad actor, but because he looks nothing like Peter Tamarkin. But he's a really good choice to play like the valet from No Exit, which is kind of the role that he's playing in here.
I like that comparison.
Yeah, he's Satan's assistant, pretty much. And I will say Walton Goggins plays a really good game show host. So all of the Press Your Luck scenes I thought were incredibly riveting, incredibly fun to watch. Paul Walter Hauser is phenomenal in this. I wish that he had done a somewhat different take on the role, but I don't think the take on the role that he had was his fault, if that makes any sense. I think that he was directed in a certain way and that the script was steering him a certain way. and that the version of this character that I would have preferred simply wouldn't have existed in this film. The places where the movie lost me were all of the places involving the big guys upstairs in what is supposed to be, the heaven overlooking the hell, the producer's booth and the sound booth and things like that, where they're trying to figure out, who is this guy and what's his deal and why did we let him on and how can we get him off and things like that. Because it all just felt so manufactured. I did not feel like there were actually any stakes to this. And the question that kept popping up in my head was, why did you not simply run with the real conflict that took place here, which was the network trying to figure out if they had to give him the money? He's on the episode winning the money, but can we somehow claim that he cheated or broke a rule? And the answer turned out to be no, he did nothing wrong. He played the game in a completely legitimate fashion and just happened to exploit a loophole that was in it because they were lazy. And because I kept wondering kind of where that element was, I got tired of the procedural elements really fast. Hauser is basically playing Michael Larson as another version of Richard Jewell, honestly. In that he's a kind of naturally unsympathetic and unlikable man who becomes sympathetic because of the way that he is treated by all of the quote unquote normal people around him. And I would have honestly liked to see him portrayed as a little bit more of the ultra confident, magnificent bastard that he comes across as on the game show episodes. Like he's a folk hero pretty much. Let him be a folk hero. I think that's what I would have liked to see, but I wasn't going to see that in this version of this movie. So I had mixed feelings, and Tim, I have no idea what you thought of it, so I'm going to stop rambling and let you talk about it too.
It may very well be the case I liked it more than you did, because I know the show, I know the story, I don't like the show. Like, I watched it as a kid, because when you're a kid, you just passively suck in the brightly colored things on television. I am on team... How is this a game show? I hate to say, because I hear that you have great deep love for it. But so for me, I don't walk into this with pre-established expectations about what I want out of the story. And I will say, I know several people heard this was coming out and were like, oh, that's such a great idea for a movie. I didn't feel that way. My feeling was, this is such a non-story. Like, how are you going to possibly extract 90 minutes from it? And they extract 90 minutes from it by making it a procedural about directing a live-to-tape TV show. And I liked that. Like, I'm interested enough in, like, what happens. I'm David Strathairn's character. He's the creator of the show and sort of the showrunner. He is not a sympathetic character, right? Like, he is just someone who's trying to save himself, throw however he needs to throw under a bus to get out of the situation. How is he going to cope with the fact that all of these avenues out of this situation are being closed off to him? And I'm interested in that. I'm interested in, like, procedural narratives, especially a procedural that's sort of like a ticking time bomb thriller in a way. It's like, and that worked for me. I think that if it had just been the thriller of what's happening to Michael on the set of Press Your Luck, I don't think you get 90 minutes out of that. But I think what the film did very cleverly was kind of switch between what's happening to Michael and what's happening in the booth just often enough that it felt like they were two complete different stories running together in a way that made me never bored with either one of them, even though I think I would have been bored with either one of them if they were told straight through.
Yeah, that's fair.
I quite enjoyed it. It has a ceiling based on the fact that, as you say, there are zero stakes. Mm-hmm. This is a stakes-free narrative. But within that, I think it's just fun for me to watch people dealing with a crisis in their own sphere of influence. And that is certainly what we're seeing in both sides of it, right? Because, like, the tension for Michael is, like, is he going to let them get under his skin? Is he going to forget his, like, immaculately perfect timing? And he's sweating the whole time, as you say. So I dug it. I gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. I think it was a good time at the pictures.
There was just
that sounds like a good time.
There was just such an easy way to give it stakes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the question of who this man is and what his kind of story is for the producer doesn't seem like it necessarily has any urgency unless they want to try to weaponize that to make his, win irrelevant or somehow invalid. I don't know. Did they not do that? Did they not say, oh, we're trying to find out who this guy is so that we can we can weasel out of trying to pay him
They're
his
trying to
money.
find out who he is so if they can determine if he's like a professional cheat. And he turns
Okay.
out to be a professional cheat, but he's not actually cheating right now, is sort of the answer to that question.
Right, I see.
And the question of what is going to happen if they determine he is a professional cheat is never really conclusively answered.
Mm.
What they are planning to do if they catch him, I don't feel like that question is ever answered, and that is one of the things that prevents the stakes from raising beyond a certain level.
They're gonna have Satan's minion, Walton Goggins, tear him to pieces on camera.
To me, it's part of the real-timeness of it, where it's just like we're watching people trying anything they can come up with, even though it's probably not going to work. And I don't know, I dug it. I dug it as a very like localized, small-scale type thing. Yeah, but we should move on. We've spent a lot of time talking about a movie that I do think. Would you say, Mandy? Do you recommend
It's
it?
worth
Do
a
you think
watch. Like,
people
I
should
did
see
have a
this?
good time. I think I had a good time for different reasons than you did, but we both had a good time. So to me, that's
And I
even
will
more
say
of a
Paul
recommendation.
Walter Hauser was one of my reasons. So he's both of our reasons.
Yes.
I think he gave one of the best performances I've seen this decade.
It's so good. So good.
Wow.
And you're right, it is basically Richard Jewell, but now Richard Jewell's on a game show, but that works for me
It's
because I
perfect.
really liked his performance in
Yes.
Richard Jewell. But we should move on. So Rhiannoch, what are you bringing to the table
Yes.
that is not...
So this is not a game show themed rom-com. It's a normal rom-com. It's called I Want You Back. It came out in 2022. And it was directed by Jason Orley, stars Charlie Day and Jenny Slate. And both the setup is that Charlie Day and Jenny Slate have both been dumped by their amazing respective partners. And then shortly after that, Charlie Day and Jenny Slate collide and they're super, super miserable. And they come up with this harebrained scheme to break up their respective partners' new relationships. So basically, Jenny Slate is like, I'm going to seduce your ex's new boyfriend. So she'll dump him and then she can get back together with you. And Charlie Day is like, okay, I'm going to become best friends with your ex and convince him that his new girlfriend, ain't worth shit. And then he'll leave her and get back together with you. Of course, in classic rom-com fashion, none of this goes as it should. I was really, really into this movie. I think it has like a bit of a slow start, but I'm so kind of rom-com skeptical these days. I feel like romance has become such kind of a dry spot. I feel like I'm desperate for good rom-coms. And this was like one of my favorite like romances that I've seen in a long time. I think, like I liked Anyone But You last year, the Glenn Powell, Sydney Sweeney joint. I thought it was like fun and it was cute. But I think before then, I can't really remember the last romance I properly liked. And this one I definitely liked more than Anyone But You. So I'm like, I actually can't remember the last modern rom-com I liked this much. So yeah, I thought it was funny. The leads are funny. The script is smart. And I think one thing that I really like is that it treats its secondary characters with like a degree of kind of respect and decency that is just way beyond what I expected it to do. Where, the exes they feel like whole people and they're not made to just feel like pawns cogs in the plot machine. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this to anyone who likes romances.
That last thing you said is one of my like specific annoyances in rom-coms is when the exes are made out to be such wildly hateful figures.
Yeah.
And I find that it's lazy screenwriting. It's just a cheap way to sort of nudge the audience's sympathies. So I'm really, really happy to hear that is not something going on here.
Yeah. I think it's not only lazy screenwriting. I feel like in a lot of cases it's obnoxiously kind of like anti-dramatic, where I'm like,
Yes.
actually, if you had this person acting in a realistic way, in like a non kind of monstrous way or whatever, you would actually get more interesting, fertile scenes out of that. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the time the agenda of pushing two people together is so strong that everyone else has to seem like some kind of like cartoon so that nobody else can feel like a viable possibility. So it's nice when a movie does not kind of topple face first into that.
I'm looking at the cast right now and discovering that it has Manny Jacinto in a supporting role. And as I
Yes.
recall, he's an actor you are quite fond of.
I love him. Yes, I really, really need him to star in a rom-com.
Now, one of the things that I think has been talked about a lot, but talked about because it's important and it matters, the rom-com has been in kind of a weird box office prison for several years now, where they don't like come out, like you mentioned Anyone But You, which was a huge hit relative to the genre theatrically.
Monster hit.
But like these films just kind of don't happen anymore. So remind me, what is the provenance of this film? Was this actually theatrically released, or did this kind of live its life on streaming?
No, I think it was direct to Prime. Yeah.
Okay. Because I vaguely heard of the title, and when you said it was Jenny Slate, I was like, yes, I definitely did hear about that. But I feel I'm very guilty of this bad habit of like, if something didn't hit theatrical, it doesn't feel to me like it exists. So I'm glad to have it like called attention to, that this is a movie.
Yeah. I think a lot of people still feel that way. Like if something doesn't even get like a cursory theatrical release, then it's like, oh, what's wrong with it? You know, what's the issue here that we didn't even want to put this into theaters for like a little second? And so much romance is like direct to streaming these days.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I feel like that really particularly hurts rom-coms because they are, one of the big places they live right now is streaming. I mean, like obviously the phenomenon of the Netflix romantic comedy is something I'm sure we've all heard of. I have not really engaged with it too much, but I think there's a lot, probably more than we can dig into in this moment talking about this movie, but like what does that say about what the studios think about consumption habits, particularly gendered consumption habits? Like what does it say about someone like me that I'm like, well, if it didn't hit a theater, it's not real, and I might be missing potentially very worthwhile genre films like this, while at the same time complaining, why don't they make genre films like this? Well, they do. They're just
it's
kind
tough.
of hiding.
I think we not to dwell too long on it, but I do think that like there's something kind of interesting in the idea that like when like an entire genre gets kind of sent directly to screening, it sort of flattens things in the way that like the term content flattens all things into just, things become indistinguishable. And so, you may have like Netflix rom-coms that are wonderful, and you may have Netflix rom-coms that are capital NR Netflix rom-coms that people, associate with a certain level of quality. But I think, it's unfortunate. And I do sort of think like in terms of the gendered thing, if you put Dune in theaters on the biggest screens, women are going to go see Dune. If you put like rom-coms on the biggest screens, like how successful is it going to be at crossing over gender barriers? I don't know. It's tough. Anyone
But You was such a unicorn in that people did go see it, and I think it's pretty clear that it was because the advertising was basically, here are two psychotically hot people who will be wearing no clothing. I also have to say, hearing you talk about this reminded me possibly the last time you and I actually like collaborated on a thing on the website was a review of another 2022 rom-com, Marry Me.
Not my favorite.
Hearing that this is better.
I remember that review. That was so fun.
It was, it was certainly a movie.
I didn't see the movie. You persuaded me that I probably shouldn't, but the review was really fun.
Well, that is what we strive for. Well, thank you for bringing that to the table. I'll have to keep an eye out for it. My backlog is long enough I can't watch movies for pleasure, really, but I'll try to keep in mind that this one might be a good one to do. But speaking of my backlog, I do have an assignment this week. It was an assignment from one of our Patreons. In this case, the Patreon is Hallvarður Jon Guthmundsson, a longtime listener, longtime supporter of the show, who obliged me to fill a top 5 gap, I would say, in my viewing history. For those who are looking for their Patreon requests, the number 1 gap in my viewing history is and remains Umberto D., the Italian neorealist film about a sad man and his dog. But this was really, really, really high on the list, and this movie is currently one of the 100 best movies ever made, according to Sight and Sound, and as we know, they are completely infallible. This would be Jacques Rivette's 1974, I think, let me double check that. Yes, 1974, Céline and Julie Go Boating, a 3.25 hour movie in which Céline and Julie don't really go boating until like the 3 hour and 9 minute mark.
Oh,
that sounds like a movie Sight and Sound would put in their top 100 of all time.
Does it also sound like a movie that I gave a 4.5 star to 5 review to?
I was going to say this sounds like a movie that
I dug this. Several people I know who saw it, and several like people in the world have the same response, which is it's kind of slow to start, but about midway through it really gets going. And I'm like, no, the opening's great because you're just watching Celine and Julie like hanging out in Paris, being
Amazing.
like annoyed at how boring life is and how. So like, and I do think you need it. I think you need the long, slow, boring opening hour because of course I think that, but it's basically about these two women who are existing in this world that doesn't really have a carved out space for people like them. And they both kind of mostly exist in terms of how they don't like the way that men look at them and sort of categorize them in these boxes. So they're kind of living these very reactionary personalities where it's basically they know that they don't like this, but they don't know what they want. They don't know what they do like. And they figure that out midway through the film. And then suddenly in the midway point of this film, we get to this shift where these two women are able to like express themselves and chase down what they think is interesting and live in this very literal secondary life. So what happens is they eventually realize that there are
you going to spoil the one plot point?
You kind of have to. It's only midway through the film. It just happens to be an entire film.
Eventually they go boating.
They do eventually go boating.
Sorry, please continue.
So they find magic candies, essentially. And when you suck on a magic candy, it places them physically in an event that happened somewhere and sometime in the past.
What?
And I will not. That is what I will leave unspoiled.
Okay, you're like describing a Neil Breen movie now. What is going on?
I will try to hint at that. But basically, they find that they can watch something that happened in life from inside of it, sort of like a very interactive TV show.
Oh my God.
And so what it sort of becomes in a way that felt like it has a lot more resonance even in the modern day than it would have in 1974. It feels like these two women bonding over their media fandom because it sort of feels like they're watching a TV show or reading a book that they're both really excited about and visualizing themselves in. And the way that Rivette frames them when they are inside the fantasy, like we mostly see the fantasy, but then occasionally we see them just sitting on a couch staring at a spot directly over the camera, and it feels like a TV's eye view of people watching a TV. And I do not think that's an accident. So we get this kind of like story about how engaging with this narrative gives them a kind of sense of what life could be if we weren't surrounded by all of these awful Parisian men, essentially. And grows increasingly whimsical and increasingly fantastical, and I won't spoil what happens in the second half. The first half is the boring half, and the second half is the fun half. So, and I like both boring and fun. I like boring even a little bit more, maybe. So, but I really, really just loved the hell out of this. It stars Juliette Berthoud and Dominique Labourier as Céline and Julie, both of whom starred in other Rivette films. Juliette Berthoud is the one I knew better because she's also one of the leads in Duel, which is one of the very small number of Rivette films I've actually seen. And I don't know why it's a small number, because every time I see one, I'm like, I love this man's cinema. I want to live in it.
Is it because you have a backlog of like 10,000 movies?
It's because I have a backlog of 10,000 movies and everything he made is at least 4 hours long.
I was just going to say, is it because all of his movies are 200 plus minutes,
This is objectively one of his short films.
Oh my God. A little 3-hour and 15-minute jaunt to the boats. Great.
But so you have these two characters, Céline and Julie, and then two other important collaborators, Boule Ogier, who is also in Duel, and Marie-France Pissier. They kind of play the main characters in this alternate world melodrama that Céline and Julie get to spy on. And those 4 actresses basically wrote the film. Like it had a sort of Altman-esque writing pattern where the 4 leads concocted what's going to happen plot-wise and dialogue-wise, and then Rivette kind of honed that down to something manageable. And how manageable was it? It's still an hour, 3 hours and 13 minutes long, so maybe not so manageable. But so it is very much this like derived narrative where the women inhabiting these characters kind of decide what they want to inhabit and where to take it, which is also kind of the plot of the movie. So it's all this like very neat nested meta narrative. I loved this a lot.
That sounds great,
the short version. So Olive Arthur, thank you for tipping my hand, making me watch a film that I blind bought on the Criterion Collection a while back because I knew I was going to love it, but I just didn't get around to watching it because it is 3.25 hours long. But this no notes, just a beautiful celebration of people loving stories, wanting more interesting things out of their boring lives. Really well acted, beautifully shot, really lovely. If I describe the cinematography and I call it lovely, you will both think I'm lying. But basically very lovely, super grainy boxes that these women are just kind of like sitting in and swimming through. Excellent movie. So that strong recommendation. Again, it is the current number 97 best film of all time according to Sight and Sound. So it's
all right. Sight and
Sound. You don't need my authority to go out and see Céline and Julie go boating. But I will also say the title. I don't speak French fluently. My understanding is that the French title is Vont en bateau, go on a boat, is apparently idiomatic. If Gavin here, he'd probably have much better way of describing it and yell at me for my pronunciation. But apparently it's an idiom for like a shaggy dog story. So the title kind of means Céline and Julie have a shaggy dog story. And that feels very much part of how it just kind of tumbles into place and takes an hour and a half before its first and only plot point kicks in and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, everything you just said about the shape of the movie seems to make that shaggy dog description make a lot of sense.
Up to and including the fact that it's called Go on a Boat and they go on a boat 5 minutes before the end of a 3-hour
What I'm
movie.
kind of hearing is that this is a Richard Linklater movie, but French and about girls and maybe even more Richard Linklater than Richard Linklater is.
I feel like I would comfortably say if you like the Richard Linklater mode where he has people walking and talking, which to be clear, he stole from the French, not from Rivette. He stole it from Romer, Romer. But yes, if you like that mode of Linklater, I see very little reason to assume you wouldn't like this movie. But yeah, so that's my pick. Have either of you seen this movie? I'm guessing the answer is no to that question. Okay. One day you're going to let me on your movie Rock Skin Mandy, and you're going to
I'm going to regret every decision I've ever made.
I've already threatened you with Satan Tango, and
you know
sort
what?
of implied that would require a financial hit that I am unwilling to take. But
it's more that it would require, what is it, like 7.5 hours? It would require 7.5 hours of telling my husband that he needs to be a single parent so that I can watch Satan Tango.
7.5 hours of people standing in rooms while cows walk by those rooms that you will ever spend.
Great, bring it on.
But anyway, so thank you, Olive Arthur, for signing that. If you, like Olive Arthur, want to control my fate, you can always do that by subscribing to us on Patreon. We actually happen to have, at the moment of recording, a spot opened up in the director's tier. That is the tier that lets you pick a movie for me to write a review of. So we don't have any podcast reviews right now, but we do have a written review. Now, who knows how long that'll stay? Those tend to go pretty fast. Maybe by the time this gets published, it'll already be filled, but certainly hop over and check that out if you want to force me to write something for you, as I just in the past week finally got around to writing a review of Kneecap, which was another movie that I, much like Luckiest Man in America, I heard the log line. I was like, that is not going to be a movie for me. And it turns out it was pretty great. So if you want to support the show, make me do things, dance like a monkey, there are certainly ways of making that happen.
Can you elaborate on that third one?
You just have to subscribe and find out. But we should probably move on to the actual subject of the night,
at hand,
which is talking about good scenes in bad movies. And again, this was your sort of push, Mandy, and you kind of talked about it a little bit already. But I'm curious, what is it about good scenes in bad movies that you find compelling?
I mean, what is it about good scenes in bad movies that I don't find compelling? It's a surreal experience to be watching an absolute piece of crap and then just out of nowhere get hit by, wait a minute, where did that come from? That was a moment of That was a single moment of perfect beauty surrounded by piles of moose excrement.
Indeed. And if you've ever seen a moose,
And
that's
is
a
there a
lot.
better moment of perfect beauty than one surrounded by piles of moose excrement?
I mean, arguably you appreciate it more, right? So
Exactly.
like if it's a movie that's just like full of beautiful gold jewels, then you start to get bored of them. But if you have, your fingernails full of moose crap and all of a sudden you're holding an emerald, you'll be so much happier.
Then it feels so
You're going to like
special.
that emerald so much more.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's going to stand out in your memory, hopefully, so much
Feel an
more.
intense sense of relief just for those few minutes.
Also, I like to reward movies for the things that they do right.
No, that's very fair.
Like it's fun. It's fun to be ironic and sarcastic and see how floridly you can crap all over a movie. That is an enjoyable exercise.
It
But
is.
I don't always find it a terribly fulfilling exercise, and looking for the gold nuggets in the moose crap always feels fulfilling.
See, this is how I know that you're a better person than I am, because I feel entirely fulfilled.
Yeah, but you're also really good at it, so
We live for the Tim Pams.
we really do.
But then follow-up question. So I know that Rhiannoch, you jumped on this topic really quickly after Mandy proposed it. So I'm curious, what grabbed you? Like, what was the hook for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think like one thing that I always kind of try to keep in mind when I'm watching any movie is, the apparent goals of the movie. So what is the movie trying to achieve? And I think it's very interesting when just for like a brief moment in time in the movie, you have like kind of a rush of understanding where you're like, that's what you've been wanting to do. That's the tone you've been trying to hit. That's the message you've been wanting to send. Like that's what engine you've been wanting to fire on for however many minutes. And you know, obviously, like your mileage may vary. Maybe some people feel that the whole time, but at least for me, when I'm watching something that I feel is not good, but just for a few, like a small sliver of the movie, I understand it. I don't know. I think that's a really fun and valuable feeling. And it also makes me respect the movie more.
No, like I've definitely had the experience of feeling like a movie wasn't clicking and I wasn't where the movie needed me to be. And then a scene happens. I'm like, oh, that. And then I routinely find if I go back and watch the movie again with that scene in mind, I often tend to like it better just because I think it's about me calibrating properly more so than the movie. But yeah, no, I totally get that.
One of the scenes that I thought of for this, like immediately, the second, like years ago when I saw this as a proposed top 5 topic, is that moment that you just described, Rhiannoch, when I felt like I understood the movie and it changed literally the entire experience of the movie for me.
Yeah. It's funny, all these movies that I've been mulling over for this one, I'm like, I just don't want to watch them again because I just, maybe I would like them better, but mostly I just feel like I'm afforded the opportunity to understand, and now I get what you were trying to do, but I think largely I still just don't feel like any of them really, really got there.
And I will say, as I was trying to come up with good examples that I wanted to talk about, I was much more landing on I am sitting in a pile of moose poo and all of a sudden here comes a butterfly. and so I was much less the scene that makes you reconceive an entire film and more the scene that like makes your miserable 3 hours for 2 seconds. You forget what you're doing. You forget what's getting into your pants, basically. And I will say, I sort of discovered something as I was going through this, for me at least. All the scenes I was coming up with tended to be one of 4 things. They were either all of a sudden there's a good musical number, maybe in a musical that hasn't been good, maybe in a film that's not a musical at all. All of a sudden there's a funny scene in a comedy that has otherwise not been funny. And all of a sudden there's a good action scene. And to a certain extent, a bad movie, but it has a good action scene is just action films. So I don't know that that's entirely fair to count. But I'm thinking of something like, why do I keep revisiting Star Wars movies? And why do I keep wanting to watch Star Wars movies? Because and it occurred to me.
I was messaging Mandy about this last night.
Yes, you were.
I had like 4 or 5 different Star Wars scenes that I was sorry, keep
where
going.
I'm at right now is every Star Wars movie since the first 2 has been arguably a bad movie that has a couple good action scenes. And is that dismissive of some of the better ones? Maybe. But like
maybe we have one of the same ones. I'm curious. Okay, keep going.
But no, and then my last category was like a scene that is just entirely not what the rest of the movie is doing. And it's like, well, if the movie had been that, I would have liked it. And I do have examples of all of the above, but I wanted to run through my taxonomy real quick, but now I have to know, because you brought it up, Mandy, what was the thing you thought of immediately years ago when this topic was first mooted?
Oh, I was going to save this for the end, because it's the biggest gulf for me between the quality of the movie and the quality of the scene.
Okay, that's fair.
Yes. That's also one thing that I was thinking, where I was like, okay, there's, for instance, one movie that is very terrible, but this scene is like, it's fine, and I would go back and rewatch it on YouTube, and I would be like, okay, at the time I was like, oh, yes, this is working for me. But is it technically a good scene? Like, would I think it was a good scene if it were not surrounded by the rest of the movie?
That's a really fair question. But yeah, so let's maybe start talking some examples. I don't think we need to do this in like a ranked list, although it sounds like, Mandy, you have a grand finale ready for us.
I don't really have a ranked list though I think I'm going to talk about mine roughly in order of gulf size. So like the size of the gap between the rest of the movie and the scene in question.
Right, well,
totally.
Well, give us one. This was your... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, what if since we mentioned Star Wars, what if we knock out Star Wars at the start?
Why not? Maybe that can be the game. Like, I'm sure we can all come up with multiple examples. What do you think is the best example of a good scene in a bad Star Wars?
This is so hard because, like the prequels were hampered by existing in an age where, they couldn't really be beautiful failures. So I think probably the biggest gulf for me is in Rise of Skywalker, which is just a completely non-functional movie. There's that one scene that I remembered where Rey is like running through the desert and she backflips. And then she tries to pull kind of an entire spaceship out of the air. And I went back and I rewatched this on YouTube and I was like, okay, I wasn't bullshitting myself. Like, it is a really visually exciting scene and an exciting piece of action. I know like there's a lot of people are annoyed at the lore because she accidentally uses force lightning or whatever, but I feel like Star Wars fans tend to be annoyed about lore all the time, so whatever. I think it's a well shot, exciting scene, and she pulls the ship out of the sky and it crashes, and she thinks that Chewbacca is on the ship, and she thinks that she's killed him. And for that moment, I was like, oh my God, are we going to experience a consequence in this movie? And of course the answer was no, and there was some bullshit, and, for that brief shining moment, I was like, here's like a scene that is good, that is well shot, that is nice. My other candidates mostly came from Phantom Menace. I was looking at Duel of the Fates and the pod racing.
Yeah, I mean, the Duel of the Fates and pod racing are like the obvious answers to this question, but I am going to go with size of gap. Even despite everything, I still think the worst Star Wars film is 2, Attack of the Clones. But It does early on, it has a scene that's kind of establishing the city planet, Coruscant. And it has like, I think it's Ewan McGregor, basically diving through like space traffic. And like hopping, it's basically a platformer video game, like a Star Wars platformer game where he's just hopping between all these like ships flying around the city planet. And it's the place in that movie where I get a sense of like the world as this big place. And I think the one thing that George Lucas is consistently good at in the prequels is wide shots and establishing shots. And I feel like that film and the third one, Revenge of the Sith, both have very near the start big, huge oneers, essentially, where like we're just seeing a bunch of ships moving around in a fairly compact environment. And it just tells us a lot about what kind of world this is, what people live here, what are the stories going around when we're not watching Jedi with lightsabers, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing in Attack of the Clones that works. And I do think there's other things that are good in the other 2 prequels, but like that is the one scene in Attack of the Clones that I'm like, I'm interested. I like this. And I'll even kind of maybe throw a bone to the scene that directly precedes it, which is the terrifically ill-written scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi goes to a diner. And
I don't remember that at all.
Attack of the Clones.
It happens in Attack of the Clones. It has the moment where he tells the fabulously named, but unfortunately only if you bought the toys. I think it's Evan Sleazebagano. Is that the character's name?
Of course.
To not sell cigarettes, but it's space, so they're not cigarettes, they're death sticks. And I do enjoy that scene.
Okay, that's not a good scene.
No, but I enjoy it. And those are really, really thin on the ground in Attack of the Clones.
I understand. I mean, this is not exactly an original Star Wars pick for this category, but the Opera House scene in Revenge of the Sith single-handedly convinced me that Revenge of the Sith is actually a good movie. And I don't mean that in...
What?
No. I don't mean that in like...
You can't think that.
I mean, here's the thing, I do. And it's entirely because every time I think about Revenge of the Sith, I think about the Opera House scene. And I forget everything else that happened in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, see, I think about poor put-upon Natalie Portman clutching her chest and saying, Annie, you're breaking my heart.
The things that I don't remember are Ewan McGregor visibly laughing into his hand when he sees a security hologram of Anakin killing younglings. No, what I always think about is the Opera House scene. And so freaking George Lucas played a years-long prank on me to get me to believe, which I still do, that Revenge of the Sith is a good movie.
I was gonna say that even Revenge of the Sith, like I did rewatch the kind of final duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan at the end for this as a candidate, and like you can see their bodies and their bodies are fighting, and like the choreography is even very fun occasionally, and I feel like a lot of action movies don't even have that right now.
That scene
so
was
that's nice.
allegedly guest directed by George Lucas's very dear friend Steven Spielberg, which I think is why it stands out as a particularly good scene.
Way. Oh my god!
Now, I was going to say I can top Mandy's embarrassing admission, which is that I keep fooling myself into thinking that Revenge of the Sith is a good movie, not for any scene that has good writing, of which there are none, but because John Williams writes a 20-minute suite combining a bunch of music at the end. And at the end of that 20-minute suite, I'm like, how could I possibly be unhappy? I just experienced all of Star Wars.
That is extremely valid. I mean, the man never misses. I hope he lives
does
forever.
not. Certainly not when Star Wars is on the table. But no, I think
Cool.
I think that is certainly a very worthy subgenre of good scene in bad movie, the Star Wars scene. But I'm curious, what are some other things that really leapt to mind when you thought of this? What were some of the places that your head went, or things that you think typify like what you get out of this happening?
Yeah, I'm curious what I liked that you kind of gave a taxonomy, Tim, because I found myself also kind of developing distinct categories as I went. And Mandy, I know you had mentioned last night that you were having maybe like good beginnings, good endings.
Yeah, I didn't have nearly as interesting a taxonomy as Tim did. The ones like Revenge of the Sith hadn't been on my list, but it was like that should have been. But I basically came up with a movie that I thought absolutely nailed the landing, a movie that has an all-time great beginning and then 2 moments in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's especially movies that like start really strong and then shit the bed. I think that's like a very specific type of like good scene in bad movie where it's like it feels distinct from just like being a mess that happens to wander into brilliance. Like it feels like you really knew what you were intending to do from the start, and then things kind of
And then like, what, did you forget to drink your coffee the next morning on set? What happened?
I tend to be more resentful, honestly, of movies that have a really great opening and then peter off, because I'm like, well, you told me at the start that you know how to make a movie, and then you didn't make one. So what's up with that?
Exactly. Mandy, which one was the one that you thought had a strong opening, or is that your
No,
final...
it's fine. We can talk about that. We can kind of go in order there. Tim, you're gonna I'm not going to surprise you with this one, and you're going to be in absolute agreement with me. It's the 1979 When a Stranger Calls.
Oh,
which is not so much a great opening scene, actually, as it is a great opening 20 minutes, but they all take place on the same set, so who cares?
It is a great short film that has the profound misfortune to be a feature film.
It is an astounding 20-minute horror film. And then there are the following 80 minutes of the film.
Oh, no. I've never seen it. I'll have to
you should watch the
20 minutes and then
like,
pretend nothing else happens.
You will miss nothing from skipping the rest of the movie. Zero important things happen in the remaining 2 acts of the movie.
Absolutely. The opening 20 minutes are an entirely self-contained narrative that will leave no feeling of, I want to see what happens next.
my pick that falls under this category of beginning strong and then falling apart is very recent. It's Osgood Perkins's Long Legs.
Interesting.
Which I
Yeah.
still haven't seen.
And I think it's a really kind of beautiful movie for a lot of it. I think it's just like a really good looking movie. But the opening, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, I was so convinced I was watching like my new favorite thing. It's so smart. Like specifically the very opening scene is like it starts in kind of like this it's like an all red sort of opening credits, and it makes you stare at the red for so long that when it shows you like a nearly black and white image of like desaturated pine trees, the trees take on this dark greenish tint, not just because that's how they look, but because of what he's doing to your eyes. And that's just like,
Right.
I've never had that experience in a theater before. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm so excited. This is so inventive. The Nicolas Cage bit in the beginning is bizarre and disturbing and amazing. And then I just felt like the entire rest of the movie just totally dissolved into making me want to be watching other kind of horror greatest hits that clearly kind of inspired moments or through lines or anything. So that was devastating. And I wish it were the case that it were a functional short film at the beginning that I could, axe
Oh
off and
man,
be like,
that's
this
so
is
annoying.
satisfying. Yeah.
I don't know that I had any opening scenes like that really kind of get the movie set off on a route that
We're
it
in
doesn't-
total agreement
doesn't end
about
up
When a Stranger
promising.
Calls, though, right? Like, how could we
Sure,
possibly
we sure
not
are.
be?
No.
And talk about a performance making in this case, 20-minute short film. The I'm sure a version of this could exist without Carol Kane in that role, but I don't want to see that version.
Right.
Because she has these huge alien eyes. And if you've ever heard Carol Kane speak, like
her little Carol Kane squeak of a voice that kind of comes out and that she kind
Wow,
of plays
that's
up
good.
here.
And both of these things are used to their maximum to create mood and atmosphere and tension throughout an already very tense scene. Like, I know this scene beat for beat. I've seen it several times, and it still scares me when I watch it.
And very canny casting, because even by that point in time, Carol Kane was like 100% associated with
Yeah.
comedy. And it's not. It's a horror movie. It's a violent, thrilling horror movie about a man in your attic who wants to kill you. What were some other like specific kinds of scenes that
I
either
am
of
dying
you
to
were able
know
to
what
isolate or-
musical numbers you had in mind.
Yes.
Well, I have a couple here
Spill.
that I sort of deliberately picked because I want to make people mad.
Oh,
Good.
you're not going to say Love, Simon, are you?
No.
Because that does have a sudden musical number, and I know you didn't adore that
It was
movie.
not.
So
It was not a film that I clicked with. No, this is so much makes people mad at me more than that. Because one of the ones that stood out to me is and the film is The Lion King.
Oh, okay.
oh,
The 1994 Disney film, where the scene in question is "I just can't wait to be king,"
that's a killer
which
number.
sonically, like as a piece of music, it's not hung up on the frankly very tiresome Africanisms that Tim Rice and Elton John are trying to shove into this whole movie.
I'm confused though
and it
because you
has-
don't like children, and that entire scene is two annoying children singing.
That entire scene is like the African savannah being turned into geometric objects that have unrealistic
Okay,
colors.
fine.
Tim also
though.
has the opportunity to self-insert as Zazu in that
True,
scene where he's
true,
like, "Now
Obviously.
listen here."
I feel very, very seen. But so that would be, I think, I kind of had a couple musical numbers, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I will say that even not just in that movie, but really in the Disney Renaissance speaks to like, we could be doing this with color and abstraction and we're mostly not. We're mostly making these kind of realist settings. And that's just like, it has like purple hippos and bright orange giraffes and like water that's just kind of a streak of zigzagging yellow and blue. And it's
Yeah.
like, I find it terribly exciting to look at.
And the end
And-
is like when the animals turn into kind of almost like a kaleidoscope of
It's
like
great.
rotating. It's great. I mean, I remember on a plane, I watched that back to back with the same scene in the CGI one, and I was just like, we are devastated as a culture.
Oh man, that it does stand out as like the biggest gap in quality between two moments in the 94 and the 2019 film, because that is awful
Yeah.
in the 2019 film. But the other number I want to talk about while I'm in the world of Disney, 1990s Disney no less, Pocahontas, which I do ultimately like The Lion King. I have it as a 3-star movie. It's not one of my favorites, but I think it works as a movie. Pocahontas I don't think is good. But I do think there's one number in Pocahontas that is just very exciting. And it's not the one people like. And it is, in fact, I think when people talk about how they don't like Pocahontas, they are specifically pointing to this as like one of the problems with Pocahontas.
Is it Savages?
It's Savages.
Of course it's Savages. That's the only right answer.
It's such a well-written song, and it's the only point in the entire narrative of the movie Pocahontas where the Native Americans are presented as people who are complicated and have conflicting feelings and are sometimes prone to the same snap judgments as all other humans, as opposed to just beatific nature gods,
right?
Which is such a sin of so much Hollywood cinema about Native Americans in that era.
And they're also having these complicated feelings and proneness to prejudices while the lighting on them is fucking incredible.
Well, the lighting on them is so incredible. It's the reds. The red. The use of red in Savages is easily the best looking thing in the entirety of Pocahontas. And like, I think if the whole movie is like this, it's about how people are very complicated and tensions come up from all these weird places. There's a movie there. It uses irony, and irony is good. We like irony in storytelling. And instead the whole movie is again just this kind of flattening out of well, Native Americans are the people who speak in beatitudes and don't ever have negative feelings. And like, that's not progressive.
Well,
That's not good for anyone.
Movies, I guess, can't be made like that.
I hate that you just said that. But anyway, so those are the two of the musical numbers I was thinking of. Is there anything that either of you had that was kind of that? Like we've got this movie that is not showing me a good time, and then all of a sudden, like, here's a song and dance, and it makes me feel...
Kind of. Okay, I was kind of looking at this was the enormous golf movie that I was looking at, because Argyle, which came out I think last year, is one of the most amazing pieces of like bad cinema I think that I've seen in a theater. And I mean, like, it had people, like, the theater around me, it had people bursting into laughter, like, throughout the movie. And I just had, like, an amazing time watching this movie. I thought it was so wonderfully broken. But there's a bit kind of near the end that the main character is, like, she's, like, ice skating using boots on top of a pair of knives on a plane of crude oil, while she just stabs many people. And it's set to, like, it's staged as almost basically like a song and dance number. And I was like, okay, this is sort of the level of camp that I felt like maybe the movie was trying to go for all along, but didn't maybe quite get there because nothing else was kind of sufficiently ridiculous to feel on purpose. So that would maybe fall under that category for me.
I had one in mind, and I was wondering if it was going to be one of the ones you brought up, Tim, but then I remembered no, because Tim adores this movie with every fiber of his being. Not because it's good, because it's precisely not good. But there is a moment in which I believe Cats 2019 becomes unironically good. And that is during Skimbleshanks the Railway
Skimbleshanks.
Cat.
It's obviously Skimbleshanks.
It's obviously Skimbleshanks. And for a brief, shining moment, the movie is not the most patently ridiculous thing that has ever
all of a
appeared
sudden
on
it actually makes you believe that Cats was a good idea.
Yeah.
And
I
workable.
still haven't seen it.
You gotta fix that.
You've got
know.
to, because
I
it
know.
is the only film that matters. But it is also, it is not good, except that Skimbleshanks is good, yes.
Skimbleshanks is a great song anyway, and weirdly, it's the song with the most complicated timing, and yet one of the only ones where they didn't fuck the timing up.
Right?
Maybe because it was complicated timing, so they had to actually stick to it, instead of letting rhythmless actors run wild with their on-set singing. but like the dancing is so good, and
dancing is
the
good,
part where
and
they zoom out to the railroad track and they're
it's
all
like
on it.
it's like
is-
visually compelling
It
when all of a
is.
sudden they're outside, but there hasn't been a transition. Like that's actually good visual storytelling. And it's like the only time it happens.
They
in all
made the
of
song
Cats.
longer, and I don't mind. They stuck in a pointless dance break, and I don't care.
Right. Are either of you familiar with the German language version of Cats?
No.
No.
The German version of Skimble Shanks is already maybe the best song in the show, but the German version is even better than the English version. And I keep thinking one of my annual rewatches of Cats, I'm going to see if I can scrounge up a German dub.
Just do
But
the
it's-
whole thing in
It's
German.
Skimbel von der Eisenbahn. So it's
Okay.
Skimbel von der Eisenbahn.
Eisenbahn.
And
I like it.
It's kind of great.
Okay.
It slaps, as the children say.
I think they've moved past that. I think they're now
Well.
on that kind of 8.
I think that might they might even be past that at that point. I think
Yeah.
that was like last year, but
I had a 12-year-old piano student say today, "Why did that kind of eat?" So I think my source is direct. Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she calls me bro every 5 seconds. It's awesome. Anyway,
wow.
yeah. So,
I,
okay, taxonomy wise, one thing that I find interesting about your categories, Tim, is that I feel
Yes.
like the first 3 at least are unified, like musical, comedy, and action, by like having certain genre expectations and like having, I don't know, expecting something from a certain genre and then being like let down when it fails to provide follow through on its promise. I found that most of my picks, most of my non-Star Wars picks, fell into the genre of art house horror. So my kind of remaining ones under that category are Ari Aster's Midsummer, which I found to be like a frustrating and beautiful mess. Darren Aronofsky's Mother. And my note specifically for that one was any individual 5-minute segment of Darren Aronofsky's Mother.
that's very, very on point for that movie.
Oh my God. And then I obviously had to bring on Alex Garland's Men, Mandy. But
Is it the scene in the tunnel?
yes, it's the tunnel scene.
It has to be the tunnel scene.
Yes, of course. It's the beautiful walk through the woods with the clouds shifting over the green and then just that kind of spine-chilling moment of tension when the person appears the man appears at the end of the tunnel. With Midsummer, it would be the cliff jump scene. I felt so just disgusted by that, just really like just deeply disturbed. There were multiple scenes in Midsummer that I thought were good, but the cliff jump scene I think was great actually. So I don't know. With those, like, I think it kind of falls into the same taxonomy approach of yours, where it's like I was looking for something from this genre movie, and I wanted more of this moment when it poked through.
And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Aronofsky, because to me, he's kind of a filmmaker who specializes in movies that I'm not there for. And then there's like the one moment, generally near the end of that movie, where I'm like, oh, well, that worked so well.
Yeah.
And it lives in my brain years and years later. And I think specifically both Noah and the Whale, which sounds like its own
Noah
movie
and the
title.
Whale. Yeah.
But because The Whale is just an almost unwatchable movie. I think.
I haven't seen
it's
it.
just like the world's worst stage to screen transfer.
Really?
No.
I thought it was like a perfect plane movie.
I watched it in the theater while
Okay.
I was eating a hamburger, so it felt.
I would not want to eat during that movie.
No.
Also, I think it may actually be to the film's benefit that in the plane cut they remove the opening scene.
Would you say it kind of ate?
To whom was that addressed?
Either of you. It's fine. Let's continue.
No, that's fair. But no, the last scene of that movie, which is like the only thing that he actually did that wasn't just the show, is this like weird, like anti-transcendent like moment where it becomes like this kind of religious beat in a way that I find really fascinating. And then in Noah, there's actually 2. There's one right at the beginning. There's like a creation sequence that summarizes Genesis up through Noah. That's basically the tree of life done as like an action movie. And then there's the scene where Noah contemplates killing children, and it's Russell Crowe with like murder rage in his eyes. And it's such a powerful moment in this kind of dopey Lord of the Rings meets Noah movie. And so Aronofsky, I think in particular, so when you said Mother, that was really like, yes, that is where he lives to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think I really like Black Swan. Overall, I haven't seen it since college, but I do feel like the ending of that is just awesome. Like it gave me full body chills.
He ends movies well.
Yeah. It's a nice talent to have. Leave a good taste in your mouth.
I was thinking about a film that I am actually pretty fond of, which is Requiem for a Dream, and how the part of that movie that, and like I realized that liking Requiem for a Dream is not exactly a hot take, but I think the part of that movie that I love and that always sticks with me, which is very different than the part of the movie that everybody else loves and sticks with them, which is defined as every moment that Christopher McDonald is on screen. I don't know. The part that I will always remember is the creepy Christopher McDonald infomercials.
No, I get that.
And that is why I love Requiem for a Dream. But on the topic of movies sticking the landing, the one that I had in mind, okay, it's a little bit of a cheat for me to call this a bad movie because I think it is objectively an okay movie. I like this movie a lot. I have it at 4 stars on Letterboxd. I acknowledge that this is wild grade inflation. I think that it has a lot of individual good moments, many of them just lines of dialogue. And certainly you can tell that the extremely stacked cast is having a blast every moment that they are on screen. But the movie overstays its welcome by about 45 minutes and never quite coheres into any of the many things that it wants to be during those 45 minutes until about the last 3, when Nicolas Cage is finally off the J-Pats plane, and is about to be delivered into the arms of his loving wife, Monica Potter, by John Cusack and Colm Meaney. Against a like crazy glittery backdrop of Vegas lights that make all of the individual sweat molecules on his body stand out. And he finally gets to give his little girl the bunny that he bought for her. And then just as she walks forward and hugs him, right to the front of the sound mix, we get, "How do I live without you?" And I will never not burst into tears when
I
that
think
moment.
I am officially in print as thinking that is Diane Warren's best Oscar-nominated song. So I
Should
am
have won.
clearly not
Should
capable of.
have won. Fuck, my heart will go on.
Well, sometimes we say things in the heat of a moment that we might change our minds about.
No. I've said that many times.
Okay.
How do
you're
I win?
talking
Should
to
have
a
won.
born-again Titanic guy. over here.
Fine. Yes, but. So yeah, Con Air is a movie that, again, I'm quite fond of, but I don't actually think it's very good in a lot of ways. I think that it is doing a lot of fun things that never quite add up into a satisfying whole. But I think that the end of that movie is, like, among other things, Monica Potter doing career best work, which, like, it's Monica Potter. That's not exactly, like, super high praise, but she's great in her non-verbal acting in that final scene. And it is Nicolas Cage showing, as he often does, but he chooses to do it like once or twice per movie that he's in, that he is actually a great actor and not just a great presence. Because the look on his face when he catches Monica Potter's eyes after the little girl gives him a hug, it's just like, my heart melts every time I see it.
Would you say your heart will not go on? Anyway.
You're really rolling him out here.
Yes, to dead silence.
I want to grab on to something that you're kind of pointing at. You and I both like Con Air, Mandy, so it's not like Con Air is a bad movie. But the movie that it had to there's one scene it had to get right. And if it gets that right, you kind of want to forgive it a little bit, which I think is maybe not the same thing as a good scene in a bad movie, but it does tie into something I wanted to bring up because one of our other friends in the alternate ending community, Cameron Shaw, who was hoping to be on this episode and wasn't able to. We are recording on Mother's Day and she's with her mother, which is an appropriate place for her to be. But she did mention a scene to me that she really hoped we would talk about. And it sort of falls into a really specific category of you had to get one scene right in this whole movie. And indeed it was the only scene you did. which is amusing to me because it happens twice in the same series. Because the scene Cameron wanted to talk about was when Bilbo meets Smaug in The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, which reminded me of the scene where Bilbo meets Gollum in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
Yep.
The only two good scenes in any Hobbit film.
Oh, yeah. And they are good.
And they're both like really good,
Yeah,
but
really
also
good.
they're the two scenes you know at the moment the series gets greenlit, you know those are going to be the two good scenes. And you just hope that any other scenes are good, and they aren't. It's just those two. But they're really good.
At least the animated version will always be there for us to ruin our lives.
For sure. That's for sure.
What happened to Peter Jackson? He used to know what the fuck he was doing, and then people started giving him money.
He decided his new job was to make dubiously, more like ethically dubious versions of archival footage, and also to try and redefine how we think about the Beatles for some reason, as though any one man is going to do that.
Yeah, The Hobbit could have been great. That is so frustrating.
At least good.
Yeah.
Like, you just had the Lord of the Rings right there.
It just didn't need to be epic. Like
The Hobbit, it did not need to be 3 films long.
You know, yes, it ends with a battle, but Bilbo crucially sleeps through it. Like, that's the tone of the story. Make it a little fairy tale where it's a punchline at the end where he wakes up and he's like, oh, right. I guess the 5 armies, they fought.
How about that? And something I've been thinking about a lot relative to The Lord of the Rings is at the time they came out, they were sort of seen as this like big new moment in CGI, especially the second one when Gollum comes out, like this crazy, exciting CGI character. But rewatching them 20x years later, they kind of feel like the last hurrah of like really rich physical filmmaking. Like those are sets and those are costumes and those are prop swords.
God, the costumes look so good.
They look so good. And then the Hobbits come along and like half of what the actors are interacting with is CGI. And there's this really heartbreaking anecdote where Ian McKellen, who loved working on the first 3, was really excited to come back. And then he realized only once he got on set, he was not going to be interacting with the cast because they were no longer going to do forced perspective. They were going to do green screen and compositing. So he's just like sitting alone in a green version of Bilbo's house, being really unhappy.
Oh, no.
Oh,
That's so sad.
now I dislike them even more.
Because they made Ian McKellen cry.
Because they made him sad. How could you do that to Ian? Yeah, no, it's astonishing how wonderfully the original trilogy holds up visually. And it's just like, you know, when you look at the costumes side by side with like the Rings of Power show, which I haven't seen the Rings of Power show, and I'm sure that the side by sides I've seen online have been hand chosen to emphasize the gulf between the two. But man, there is a gulf. Like, wow. And this is for a really, really expensive show. Like,
the most expensive show.
Yeah.
Ever. I still need to, at some point, I'm going to watch The Rings of Power. It's the only adaptation of Tolkien that I haven't seen.
Okay.
And it feels like that is a very conspicuous absence.
Scratch the completionist itch.
Exactly. Which
All right.
That's an itch that I get way too often.
You don't have to do this to yourself.
Well, I do. I want to actually use completionist itch as a transition point because I do want to talk about my other category, which is the scene that is good because everything about the movie sucks. And then there's the one scene that's just being something else.
Yes.
And that scene is good because it's not the movie. And what leapt to my mind and what made me think of this as a category is maybe the quintessential good scene in a bad movie. Like everyone knows this. And completionism gets me there because it is the film you only watch when you've seen all but like 3 Steven Spielberg films. So it's time to watch the really shitty ones. Because it's in 1941. His awful screwball comedy about shenanigans in early World War II and paranoia in Los Angeles. Have either of you seen this film?
No.
Steven Spielberg has such a very deep bag of tricks. Comedy's not in that bag.
Oh.
Wait, what is this film called?
1941.
Okay. I thought you were saying he made a film in 1941, and
No,
I was very confused.
He was not yet born.
I did not think so.
But
he's the same age as my dad, so that would be impossible.
Right. So the film is 1941, set in December 1941, right after Pearl Harbor. Everyone's terrified. Are the Japanese going to come? Are they going to destroy? And apparently this was like vaguely a true story that like there was a lot of paranoia about like no one expected the Pearl Harbor bombings. So like, what's next? Are they going to bomb Los Angeles? Are they going to bomb San Francisco? So this is a story about people running around being idiots in San Francisco, done as like this big slapstick comedy. It was a Belushi and Aykroyd film back when like Belushi Aykroyd films were kind of like a miniature subgenre of comedy, written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. It's a disaster. It's an awful movie. But there is a scene where the like blowhard military guy, played I think by Robert Stack, goes into a movie theater as all this chaos is happening, and he watches Dumbo, and he sits there being like moved to tears by Dumbo. And it's this perfect moment about how art can like just touch you and take you out of the moment you're in and cause you to reckon with emotions that you weren't ready to reckon with in that instant.
Like this scene and what it's doing, for example.
Like that. And it's just this perfect Spielberg moment because it's about the transcendent power of cinema. And it is surrounded by everything awful. But it's like, you have to watch the movie if you care about Spielberg, because this scene is like a perfect scene. So that to me is kind of like, again, I think it's one of the quintessential scenes. Like everyone who watches 1941 always comes away with the takeaway. Well, that Dumbo scene though. And so it's not an original thought here, but I do think it speaks to the scene in which the movie was just misfiring on all cylinders, but then it got it all together. And it was like, what if we just did this for just 3 minutes? You're going to love those 3 minutes. You'll remember those 3 minutes. And now we're going to go back to James Belushi driving planes into buses or whatever the hell happens in that movie.
Sounds rough.
It's terrible. It's his worst film. Lost World's really bad, but it's neck and neck.
I remember nothing that happened in Lost World. Like
Speaking
not a single frame.
Good movie, bad movie with one good scene. They send a trailer over a cliff, and it's great. It's like, why is every other part of the Lost World terrible? But they send a trailer over a cliff, and it's great. So,
well, you can't make a 90-minute movie of people sending trailers over cliffs, or maybe you can.
I mean, what is the entirety of the Mad Max franchise if not take things on wheels and make them do crazy things that they should not be doing?
Fair.
True. All right, so that's the totally different scenes category. Did we touch on the action or comedy sections of your picks?
Well, I can certainly give you the things I was thinking of. I mean, action Star Wars got us there, but also this is another one that might make people mad. I don't know. Ben-Hur, beloved Best Picture winner Ben-Hur. I find it turgid and unwatchable, but my God, the chariot scene is good.
Oh, yeah.
Daring to call it a bad movie.
I mean, I think that there are still.
This is on brand for you.
It is very well. I mean, I have a written review of Ben-Hur where I say I don't like this movie, but I do like the chariot
but even
scene,
if you didn't, this would be on brand
this
for you.
This would still be on brand for me. And then comedy-wise, well, one of them actually ties back into my musical numbers thing, because one of the ones that I thought of, the Marx Brothers film At the Circus, which is the first, I think, mostly terrible Marx Brothers film. It's from, I think, 1939. But it does have, like, right at the start, the musical number Lydia the Tattooed Lady, which, if either of you are familiar with it.
Nope.
It's Groucho doing this, like, comic number about a woman. It's set at the circus, and he's like, I remember the circus. I remember my love, Lydia. And then sings about Lydia the Tattooed Lady. And it's basically just an excuse for, like, lots of really dirty puns about, like, where women can have things inked on their bodies. But it's funny as hell. And then you go watch the rest of this movie, and nothing in the movie's funny. But that scene is really, really good. And then
I think you said this. It happens like right at the beginning, and so it's like to a movie
it's
full
certainly
of
in the
great
first like
promise,
6 minutes of the film.
Wow,
it's like his first full length scene singing Lydia the Tattooed Lady. And then the other example I thought of was from one of the latter day Pink Panther series, the Pink Panther sequels, which God help you if you watched all the Pink Panther movies. But in the Pink Panther Strikes Again, which I think is probably the worst of them, at least the worst of the ones made by Blake Edwards with Peter Sellers. And not Peter Sellers dead, but showing up in stock footage, which describes 2 of the Pink Panther movies. There is a scene where he is pretending to be a dentist, and he gets the guy who he's trying to convince is his patient hopped up on laughing gas, and then he also gets hopped up on laughing gas. So it's these 2 people hopped up on laughing gas both of whom know that they're enemies, but like they're so goofy that they can't do anything about it. And he also does pull the guy's tooth out while this is all going on. And it's like a perfect slapstick sequence in the middle of this movie that is full of very bad slapstick sequences.
That sounds fun. For comedy, I'm trying to think of any comedy I've seen that I would classify as a bad comedy that I can remember a funny and good scene in it. And I think my problem is that I become so distressed when a comedy is not funny that I'm just put into this fight or flight sort of feeling where I'm like, I should turn this off. I want this to be funny. Why is this not funny? What's wrong with me? And so I think just for the duration of the movie, like if that has happened for long enough, then I just constitutionally am incapable of finding any later part of it amusing because I'm just too distressed to feel it.
No, I get that. Bad comedies are awful. Like bad anything can be watchable, but bad comedies they hurt.
Because they become sad.
Yeah.
Because what's the opposite of funny? It's sad.
I would say that I consider Zoolander to be generally kind of a dumb, mediocre movie, but the Center for Ants puts me in absolute stitches.
What is this?
My biggest problem with Zoolander is that I saw it far, far, far too late after I'd heard every line in the movie. So I was
that is a problem.
But Center for Ants is very good.
I saw that in high school.
I think Will Ferrell in general is very good in that, which is weird because I don't ever like Will Ferrell.
I was going to say, I don't say nice things about Will Ferrell, but
does he play the Prime Minister of Malaysia or something?
I don't recall. He replays the villain. I know that.
I feel like that movie was notable to me because my mom's side of the family is from Malaysia. And I was like, Malaysia mentioned! But it was in, like this pointless way.
In the context of Will Ferrell, that's an insult.
I don't know about this for me.
Well, do we have any other sort of categories we want to talk about, any of the big examples before we get to Mandy's grand finale?
Well, I considered poking the bear and picking scenes from
You're better than this.
From Christopher Nolan's Tenet or Jupiter Ascending.
Poke it.
Okay, you know what's silly is my favorite scene from Jupiter Ascending is actually the bit where they have to try and navigate space bureaucracy. I find that bit to be really funny and satisfying. I do think Jupiter Ascending is a good time. I don't think it's a good movie, but I think it's generally fun. Tenet, I think is we won't get into it. It's fine. We don't need to talk about it. Mandy, what's your grand finale?
The bear has been poked.
Tenet mentioned.
Wait, Mandy, I know that Tenet is like a base-breaking film in the alternate ending community. Which side do you fall on, Mandy?
Oh, I think
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
I just know that every time it gets brought up in our community,
Mandy's
I'm
life
going to have a
ends.
headache by the end of it.
Because it's my favorite Chris Nolan film.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Oh my God. Yes, it's so divisive and for such silly reasons. I love talking about it because I don't care, I just deeply don't care, and so to bring it up is a joy and a pleasure.
Well, it's a frivolous movie. It's a soap bubble movie.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be mad if someone doesn't agree with you on Tenet. That would be like saying, I'm mad that you don't agree with me on which is the best flavor of bubble gum.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's a what is it, bon mot? I don't know. Whatever that phrase is. But yeah, I will say, no, this is not the prompt. I was just going to quote my least favorite line of Tenet for posterity. Tim, do you know what line I'm referring to?
No, because I can't hear any of them.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's why I'm fine with Tenet, is because I view dialogue as an imposition. Exactly. It's a bad thing that happened to movies and we can't get away from it. But some bold filmmakers at least bury it in the mix.
Oh my God. But yeah, there's a bit near the end where the world is about to end and Elizabeth Debicki is sitting in the back of this truck and she's a woman who has no personality traits except to care about her son. And I think I think it might be Robert Pattinson who says, the world destroyed, everything unmade, the whole fabric of time unwound or whatever. Does that sound dangerous enough to you? And she says, everyone? That includes my son. It's so
Really?
That
it's
that is how Chris Nolan believes it is appropriate to write family relationships,
it is
and I
so
find that
funny.
charming.
Oh my god, it's
This is
actually
the
the best
same man
thing.
who made a whole ass movie about how love is a stronger force than gravity, and does
Yes.
does this while having a obviously theoretical understanding of love.
Man, if
And
he
I
works really hard, he could get up to the level of Stephen King in writing women.
I mean,
That includes my son. Anyway, Angie, please take it away for our grand
Oh, God.
finale.
Sorry. Well, on the topic of people who don't function properly in society, so the movie that I thought of instantly when I first saw this topic broached many, many years ago, or however many years ago it was, this is a movie that I wrote about for my column a little while ago. And I'm going to preface this with I need you people to see this movie. I cannot keep being the only person in the greater alternate ending cinematic universe who has seen Ghosts Can't Do It. So
Please enlighten
everybody out
us.
there
well, I don't know how to
listening,
help you with that.
I need you to see this, Tim. I'm aware that there's a way
Sell
to
me.
make you watch things, but okay, I'm going to sell you. All right, so Ghosts Can't Do It,
Great title.
which the title
by the way.
means what you think it means.
Okay, I was wondering.
But you got to hear both sides of the controversy, and there was also a movie made in 1987 that in some markets had the title Ghosts Can Do It. So there is apparently a debate
I feel like
raging,
that could easily have been like a foreign translated title, like The Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
right? It was not, though. It's a very little known movie. So is Ghosts Can't Do It, for that matter. So Ghosts Can't Do It, dear God. Even just saying the title out loud. So this was the fourth collaboration between husband and wife team director John Derek and leading lady Bo Derek. So John Derek and Bo Derek got together when they were making a film off on a little remote Greek island. And at the time, John Derek, who was considerably older than, at the time, Mary Kathleen Collins, was married to somebody else, and she was 16, and they got together anyway. And when his then wife, Linda Evans, found out about it, she quit the film in a huff and made a big ol' splash about it, reasonably so,
As is her right.
when she returned to the continent. So John and Mary Kathleen lay low in Germany until she turned 18, at which point they declared themselves legally a couple. She changed her name to Bo Derek and tried to make it in the movies, and the problem is that she was not terribly good at doing the movies. She had one like really big splashy role in 10 as the white girl with the cornrows,
Yes.
and she was supposed to be like the next big sex symbol, and then she just wasn't a very good actress. And so she spent the 1980s exclusively starring in films made by her husband, all of which are terrible. So there was their first collaboration together, which was called Once Upon a Love, I believe, when they were making it, which is just a terrible title.
That's legendary.
It is, but then I don't even remember the title that they actually released it under. Let's just call it Once Upon a Love because that's much better. But then they also made Tarzan the Ape Man and Bolero, which is another film that I've written about for the column, which is also hilarious, and I need more people to see it. But then their final collaboration together was Ghosts Can't Do It. John Derek must have had major dirt on every elder Hollywood statesman, because not only did he get George Kennedy to appear in a major role in Bolero, he got Anthony Quinn to co-star in Ghosts Can't Do It alongside his wife. So Ghosts Can't Do It is about a beautiful young lady played by Bo who is married to an elderly gajillionaire played by Anthony Quinn, who then one day, as they're cavorting out in their ski lodge in Colorado or wherever they are, has a heart attack, and does not die, but then kills himself because he is told by his doctors that in his current state, he will not be able to have sex with his wife, and he decides that that is not a life worth living.
Fate worse than death.
Indeed. So
Oh
he
my
kills himself.
God. Does he then come back as a ghost and the entire plot of the
does.
movie is them trying to bone down, but he's a ghost?
He's worse. He's not just a ghost. He's the ghost of an impotent man. So he's screwed twice over.
Well, see, they realize very quickly the problem, which is you see that ghosts can't do it. So his suicide didn't solve anything.
Can
But-
I register a guess? Does he possess the bodies of virile young men and have sex with their bodies?
Almost.
Okay, that's how I would have written.
It's even weirder than that, actually. The plot that they concoct is that they are going to find a virile young man and murder him. So that the
so it's like a
spirit-
sexploitation version of Heaven Can Wait.
Yes, so that the spirit of
Wild.
Anthony Quinn can take over his body,
Oh my goodness.
and then Bo can have sex with a hot young man who is also Anthony Quinn.
All right.
Perfect solution.
So what's the good part?
Okay, so the good part. So, for most of the movie, because they also filmed this movie on like the change they found in John Derek's couch cushions, I guess. The ghost effects on Anthony Quinn are done by like superimposing the effect of a swimming pool over his face.
Yes. This sounds amazing.
That does sound like a good scene in a bad movie. Convince me.
Okay, that's not- so, however, at one point, the movie is utterly incoherent, by the way, so I cannot explain to you what is
No.
happening in the plot when this scene happens. But there is a scene where somehow the ghost of, what is his name? Scott, I think his name, because she keeps calling him Great Scott, because that's how John Derek writes dialogue. Have I sold you on this yet, Tim?
Oh, you sold me on this. This was the last collaboration between the Derricks.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm going to keep selling you on it. Okay, so for reasons that are not clear, he is able to like kind of come into the physical world for a moment.
Come
and
into the
I
physical.
thought ghosts couldn't do it, but you just told me they can.
Yeah.
He is
Anyway.
able to enter the physical world.
To enter? Yeah, to
I
enter.
mean, thank you for
Randy
for
can't
beating
do
the
it.
back of the punch.
I'm so
He's
sorry.
able to
Keep going.
appear momentarily in the physical world.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And then, so if he's only able to appear momentarily, would you say he kind of peters out? Keep telling the story, man.
Oh my god. Okay, this has been fun. Anyway, so it's like a sticking point between them for reasons I don't remember. That Scott never wanted to dance with Katie. That's Bo's name. While they were alive, and she always wanted him to dance with her, like at a party or something.
Okay.
And so he's like, "Okay, let's dance now." And so, unfortunately, the scene is interspersed with like images of Bo just kind of like holding her arms out around an invisible partner and circling around, which look completely ridiculous. But during the moments when they are actually dancing, it is genuinely incredibly romantic. So, like,
Okay.
Anthony Quinn's a very good actor anyway, but just like they're having this like barely audible little conversation that's like the kind of thing that you associate with couples who've been married a very long time and have kind of gone over these beats forever, but still aren't really tired of them because they're just like they're both part of the routine and part of the things that they love about each other. Bo Derek, who for most of the movie has been wearing this frightening, extremely wide, extremely plasticky white smile, just like lets it off her face and smiles for real. And you get the impression that this is a couple who were genuinely in love and genuinely like had a real spark between them during the time that they were alive. And I almost had to like rewind this scene because it felt like a scene got dropped in from another movie.
Oh,
Because
okay.
that's how big the jump in quality felt. And the reason this also kind of rewrote the entire movie for me was because at that moment I was kind of like, this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
John and Bo Derek are telling the rest of the world to go fuck themselves.
Ah.
Because, like, okay, yes, they got together in a super skeezy way, but then they remained married for several decades until his death. They exclusively made movies together. They seemed, even though neither of them had any idea what they were doing, to be having a really good time making these movies together, sometimes at other people's expense, but we don't need to get into that part. But it just felt like during this scene, it was, even though, Anthony Quinn is the John Derek stand-in here, it was just them being like, you know what? Fuck you guys. We're in love. We're having a great time. We're going to do our thing, and we don't care what the rest of you say. And it was like that.
That's kind of sweet.
Isn't it? And that meta text made the scene even better, even with Bo in her ridiculous ghost pose dancing around, which, like, how do I feel about that? Kind of conflicted given the other things that I've seen in his career.
The rest of John Derek's
Given the rest
situation.
of John Derek's cinematic output, I have mixed feelings
Given the rest
about
of
that.
John Derek.
Yes, also that. But you know what? I'm glad that they found each other and were madly in love with each other.
Well,
love in the world makes me happy, and I need you and everyone else to see this movie because I'm tired of being the only person who can talk about it.
I was going to say, maybe I will just do a marathon of the Derek and Derek collaborations. There aren't that many of them. And
because Bolero is
that's
also
where I've been these days.
Bolero is also a hilarious disaster piece, and I'm sure Tarzan the Ape Man will be when I get around to it too.
Well, I think that's as good a place to stop. We've been chatting about this for a while, but really, really great sharing these thoughts with both of you. Thank you for bringing your scenes and your ideas about why we do this thing that is called watching bad movies in the hopes of finding a good scene. So, but before we go, let me just ask, do either of you have any exciting news in the world you want to talk about? Any projects you want to plug?
Yes, I just had a new book come out. It is called Come Home to My Heart. It came out last week. And yes, it is available now wherever books are sold under my pen name,
so
though.
Good.
Yes, and that pen name is what, for those who are not familiar?
Yes, my pen name is Riley Redgate.
I love that, that your initials are RR in both cases because it makes you sound like a DC superhero.
I have to match.
Thank you both very, very much for showing up. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you want to support the show, be sure to click on our Patreon. As mentioned, we currently have a director slot opening, so you can make me write about a movie. Otherwise, always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you next week.